All right, let's dive into one of the biggest, most unsettling questions in all of psychology. Where does psychopathy actually come from? This is the ultimate nature versus nature question, isn't it? But the stakes are incredibly high here. Are people just born this way, with something wired differently in their brains? Or does something happen to make them this way? Well, we're going to get into it.
And what the science is telling us is, well, it's not a simple either-or answer. It turns out the answer is kind of written in our experiences, in a way that literally gets under our skin and changes us from the inside out. Okay, so before we go any further, let's make sure we're all on the same page about what psychopathy actually is. We're not just talking about someone being a bad person. This is a real, lifelong condition. We're talking about a deep, profound lack of empathy, a pattern of manipulation, and consistent antisocial behavior.
So that brings us to the really big idea here. How can something that happens to you as a kid fundamentally change who you become on a biological level? I love this quote because it puts it so perfectly. Think of the brain as the machine, the hardware. Our genes might set the basic specs, but it's our experiences, our environment that's writing the software. And you really can't have one without the other. And there's a name for this process, a really crucial one for our conversation today. It's called biological embedding. This is the scientific idea that what happens to us, especially when we're young, doesn't just create memories, it can actually physically alter our biological systems for the long haul. So how does it work? Well, it's basically a three-step dance. First, something happens. Let's say trauma or neglect. Then, that experience gets under the skin and starts tweaking our biological processes. And if that keeps happening, those changes can become stable, locked in, and they can affect our behavior for the rest of our lives. So where does a process this powerful even begin? Well, for most of us, it starts in our very first environment, our family. And the research is pretty clear on this. There are some major risk factors in early childhood that pop up again and again. We're talking about things like parental rejection, not being able to form a good bond with your caregivers, being separated from your parents really early on, even just harsh or totally unpredictable parenting. So why does that early bonding matter so much? Well, it's absolutely critical for building what scientists call our mirror neuron system. This is basically the empathy wiring in our brain. It's what lets us feel what other people are feeling. And if that early secure bond isn't there, that whole system can get thrown way off track. But here's a twist that might surprise you. You'd think a tough family life would be the main story, and it is, for low to moderate psychopathy. But a really fascinating study found that a majority of the most severe cases, they actually came from good homes with competent parents. And what does that suggest? It suggests that when you get to the extreme end of the spectrum, there might be a much stronger biological factor at play. Okay, so let's zoom in now from the family in general to something more specific, the deep and lasting impact of trauma. And the connection here is it's impossible to ignore. Study after study shows that high rates of being victimized as a kid are directly linked to higher psychopathy scores and, more violent behavior down the line. What's really interesting is that different kinds of trauma seem to be linked to different kinds of traits. So, for example, neglect is often connected to what's called a flattened affect, that kind of emotional coldness you might think of. Sexual abuse, on the other hand, is more often linked with things like impulsivity and a grandiose sense of self. And this isn't just psychological. These experiences leave actual physical scars on the brain. We're talking about key areas like the ventromedial prefrontal cortex. You can think of that as the brain's brakes, the part that helps with impulse control and empathy. And also the amygdala, which is like our fear and emotion control center. Of course, life doesn't just happen inside the home. As we get older, the world outside, our community, our friends, starts to play a huge, powerful role. So you have these other big environmental influences, right? Things like having parents who are involved in crime, or just growing up in a really rough, violent neighborhood. And then, especially in the teenage years, peer pressure becomes huge, getting in with gangs, that sort of thing. At the heart of all of this, for a psychopath, is this breakdown in what's called social learning. See, most of us learn empathy by feeling it, by seeing it in others. But for them, it's like that channel is just broken. They never quite learn that fundamental lesson about why another person's pain should matter. And when you can't learn that, your whole way of thinking gets warped. It leads to things like hostile attribution bias. That's a fancy term for a really simple and scary idea. You see threats everywhere. Someone bumps into you on the street, they did it on purpose. Someone gives you a funny look, they're plotting against you. I mean, how can you ever build a healthy relationship if you think everyone is out to get you? Okay, so we've talked about biology, family, trauma, community. How do all these pieces fit together? Well, the scary thing is they don't just add up. They feed on each other and they create a vicious cycle.
And here it is, the whole loop in a nutshell. It starts with those bad early experiences, right? They get biologically embedded, and they literally change the brain. That changed brain now sees the world through that hostile, distorted filter. So the person acts out, which of course leads to more negative reactions from the world, more rejection, which then just reinforces the messed up biology. It's this powerful, awful, self-feeding cycle. So in the end, are psychopaths born or made? The answer is yes. It's not one or the other. It's this incredible, complex dance where our environment literally rewrites our biology. And if that's true, well, it leaves us with a really big question, doesn't it? If our environment has that much power, what's our responsibility to create better ones where everyone has a chance to thrive? Thanks for tuning in.